Behind the Line, episode 13. I'm your host, KC. I've got a lot to go over today on the podcast. I'm going to get to my college football bets later on. If you want to skip to those, the timestamp to the college football plays is in the description below. Actually, going to go over a little bit of WWE talk today for the first time on this podcast. I don't consider WWE a sport, nor do I really watch it. But I do keep up with it a little bit. Just something interesting caught my attention on Twitter over the weekend that I wanted to go over with you guys regarding the WWE. But I want to start off by talking about Baker Mayfield and the Cleveland Browns. Before the start of the season, I told you guys that this season in Cleveland had the potential to be a disaster. And that in all likelihood it would be. I talked about the history of players and or teams in this league that hype themselves up, that are always finding ways to attract the attention of the media. Guys who argue with members of the media, guys like Baker Mayfield, and how things like that never translate to success on the field in the NFL. Guys like Baker Mayfield do not last in this league. The loudest guy in the room is always the weakest guy in the room. And yes, I stole that line from American Gangster, Denzel Washington. All summer long, all we heard out of Cleveland was how talented this roster was, which is true. We also heard how great this team was going to be, how many games they were going to win, how dominant these guys were going to be. We're 5 weeks into the NFL season, and the Cleveland Browns are the disaster that I predicted that they would be. To put it bluntly, Baker Mayfield's fucking terrible. I don't know any other way to describe him so far 5 weeks into this season. That performance Monday night at San Francisco was embarrassing. 8 of 22. 100 fucking yards passing. I just decimated Colt McCoy on Tuesday's podcast for only managing 119 yards on 27 attempts. Baker Mayfield found a way to be worse than Colt fucking McCoy. That's fucking talent right there. Thing is, this type of performance is becoming a regular occurrence. This isn't like a one-off for Baker Mayfield. He was terrible against the Rams. Terrible against the Tennessee Titans in week 1. This fucking guy has thrown 8 interceptions to 4 touchdowns. 50% more interceptions than he is getting his team into the end zone. Sacked 16 times. He is getting no help from this Cleveland offensive line. Quarterback rating of 68.5 on the year. Now, I understand the point that young quarterbacks are going to struggle. The jump from college to the NFL, especially at the quarterback position, is a huge leap. Kyler Murray struggled this season. Until he played the Cincinnati Bengals, of course. He looked fucking great against the Bengals. Lucky for Baker Mayfield, he gets to play the Bengals twice this year. But young quarterbacks are going to struggle in this league. We all understand that point. But Baker Mayfield is held to a higher standard, at least in my opinion. He's held to a higher standard because he can't keep his mouth shut. His mouth writing checks his ass can't cash at this point. My question is, how much longer is this going to go on before the locker room in Cleveland begins to implode? You've got a lot of egos, a lot of diva-type players in that locker room. You've got a rookie head coach in Freddie Kitchens who, in my opinion, is in way over his head, and he knows it. He has no idea what to do with all of these offensive weapons. Seems like every week, the Browns are trying these cutesy, off-the-wall trick plays to get guys like Odell Beckham involved, and it's not working. And in the rare occasion that it does work, the Browns turn the fucking ball over. Not all of these interceptions are Baker Mayfield's fault. This team comes together and turns the ball over as a collective unit. This Browns team is undisciplined, which in my opinion points right back to the coaching staff and Freddie Kitchens. It was obvious to me that they were undisciplined when you heard all of the players hyping up this, quote, loaded team all throughout training camp. Your elite NFL teams, you hear nothing out of them. Cleveland is one of the most penalized teams in the league at this point of the season. 9.6 penalties for an average of 85 yards per game. We saw this in full effect on Monday night. Anytime the Browns get a drive going, it's either killed by penalties or turnovers. One of the two. This team turns the fucking ball over on 15% of their drives. They have the same amount of turnovers as they have offensive touchdowns. And people are sitting here wondering how a team as talented as Cleveland is sitting at 2-3. That right there should explain all you need to know. I go back to the question that I asked a minute ago. How much longer can this type of losing go on before this locker room implodes? Before guys start chirping in the media? It's not like this Browns team is losing close games. This team's getting blown out. 2 of their 3 losses have been by a combined 58 points. We're already hearing about wide receivers around the NFL wanting to be traded off of their underperforming teams or when they have an underperforming quarterback. Stephon Diggs is a prime example of this in Minnesota. How long until Odell Beckham requests a trade out of Cleveland? He's having one of the worst years of his career. The past 2 games, he's had 47 combined receiving yards. Scored 1 touchdown all season. This motherfucker used to have 47 receiving yards on 1 drive. Take out the game against the Jets. A game that shouldn't even count because half of the fucking Jets roster's on IR. Odell Beckham Jr. is averaging 4 catches and 44 yards a game. It's not like he's not being targeted. That's not the case. They're trying to get him the ball. Baker Mayfield just can't fucking throw him the ball accurately. I don't see this team as it's currently constructed making it past the trade deadline. I really don't. Something has got to change. This team had too much hype, too many expectations coming into the year for them to be sitting at 2-3 in this point and be okay with it. Coming into this season, we haven't seen the Cleveland Browns fans this excited in 30 years. I don't remember the last time a team in Cleveland had this much expectation going into the year. Now, Freddie Kitchens can't figure out what to do with the offense as it's constructed now with all the weapons that he's got. You've got Kareem Hunt scheduled to arrive in November off of his suspension. If Freddie Kitchens can't figure out what to do with these guys now, how the fuck do you expect me to believe that adding another dynamic player to this roster is going to make things better? And that Freddie Kitchens is going to wake up one morning and just magically figure out how to use everybody? Then get the fuck out of here with that. On top of all that, they've got to fix this offensive line. Besides Baker Mayfield's mouth, that's the biggest problem that the Browns have. Did anyone else notice we haven't heard a peep out of Baker Mayfield all week this week? It's Friday. They played on Monday. 3 days have went by. We have heard nothing out of Baker Mayfield. Remember last week after they had that big game against Baltimore, basically blew Baltimore out at home? How arrogant he was, how he mentioned Rex Ryan in his press conference saying that Rex Ryan's comments the week before had nothing to do with motivating that team to win that game. This week, dead silence, all crickets. Now I see Tuesday where Richard Sherman came out after the game and claimed Baker Mayfield snubbed him in the pregame handshake. The video that came out afterwards proved Richard Sherman's claim was baseless. But this is the same point I've been making all year about Baker Mayfield. When you're the loudest guy in the league, when you hype yourself and your team up all off season and throughout the season, You're going to get the best from every opponent. Sherman said the snub was used as motivation for the 49ers to pretty much embarrass the Browns on national TV. He had an interception on the first drive. Whether it's true or not is beside the point. Mayfield has built this reputation, this arrogant aura around him, that every team in the league wants to punch him in the mouth. They're going to give him their best. But if you're a fan of the Browns, don't worry. Because if they keep losing like this, all of that will go away. All right, moving right along. America as a country, we love our fads. Something will get hot or popular. It'll spread across the country. A year or two later, everyone has forgotten about it. Remember back in the 90s when people were wearing those lame-ass fanny packs? They're actually starting to come back around. When I was in New Orleans last weekend, I saw some fucking dudes wearing fanny packs. It was just fucking weird. Or, when I was in high school, all the girls were wearing these bongo shorts. Vanilla Ice, the Macarena. I could go on and on about fads in my lifetime that were popular for 12 to 18 months and just disappeared. The world of sports is no different. Last year, the NFL was on fire for Baker Mayfield. This year, he's struggling like a motherfucker. Michael Vick was on top of the fucking world for 3 or 4 years. I mean, this dude was everywhere. Endorsement deals. You saw him on commercials. Until we learned that he was abusing and murdering innocent dogs. And right now, the NFL world is on fire for Gardner Minshew. The past few weeks, all I've been hearing about is this so-called Minshew Mania. Watching the game Sunday between Jacksonville and Carolina, the commentators kept mentioning this Minshew magic. How Gardner Minshew was going to lead the Jacksonville comeback. They're down on the road. And Gardner Minshew was going to lead them back. They're going to win that game. It didn't fucking happen. And to be perfectly honest with you, I really don't understand this fascination with Gardner Minshew. Last year, we all fell in love with Patrick Mahomes. But the praise he was receiving was well-deserved. He was lighting up the scoreboard. His stats were unbelievable. The Chiefs were one of the best teams in the league. They went to the fucking AFC Championship game. We were seeing an offense out of Kansas City that was just demolishing teams. An offense that we hadn't seen perform like that in years. I mean, they were blowing teams out. Patrick Mahomes backed up the hype. The Jacksonville Jaguars are 2-3. They're tied for last place in the AFC South. Gardner Minshew has one game with over 300 yards passing. Past 2 games. Completion percentage is under 60%. His 2 wins are against Denver and Tennessee. 2 teams that are struggling right now, especially at the quarterback position. So my question is, where the fuck is this Minshew Mania coming from? Look, I understand that this guy came in week 1 after the Nick Foles injury with 0 expectations. And to be honest, he hasn't played bad. He really hasn't. Actually, he's had some decent games. But he hasn't played to a level that warrants this weird fascination with him. The media and fans are acting like this guy is the second coming of Peyton Manning. He's 5 games into his fucking career. I read an article on ESPN Wednesday that actually referenced Peyton Manning and Gardner Minshew in the same sentence. Are you fucking kidding me? Jacksonville plays the Saints on Sunday, and I'm going to go ahead and say it right now. New Orleans is going to put an end to all of this Minshew Mania nonsense. That defense in New Orleans is legit. I've been saying it all year. They're not worried about Gardner Minshew. I can promise you that. Now, I'm not saying this guy won't have a great career. He might. And to be honest, I actually like him. I like to watch him play. He's an exciting player. I just don't agree with crowning him as this elite once-in-a-lifetime quarterback when he's yet to prove anything? He's 2-3 for Christ's sakes. So why don't we all just relax for a minute before we crown him the next Patrick Mahomes? All right. Now, I don't talk much professional wrestling on this podcast, or, quote, sports entertainment, as they call it now. When I was growing up and I was watching WWF, it was called professional wrestling. And when we were kids, we thought it was real. Nowadays, it's nothing but glorified gymnastics. And the storylines are written for children by brain-dead adults. The storylines are fucking awful. Over the weekend on Twitter, I noticed that WWE was trending. And I think it was Sunday night. Yeah, it was Sunday night. They were trending, and it wasn't positive. Their fans were in an uproar because a main event match at a pay-per-view ended in a disqualification. And I guess the rules of the match stated that the match could not end in a disqualification. So people on Twitter were ripping this company to shreds, and rightfully so. I get it. Say what you want about WWE fans, but it's hilarious when they get on their soapbox about this company. I spent 30 minutes to an hour Sunday night just reading the Twitter complaints and the comments by these people, just laughing my ass off. Now, it's been years since I've watched the WWE. I do kind of keep up with it. YouTube's got a couple of entertaining wrestling podcasters, and I listen to a couple of them, mainly but just because they're entertaining, ripping the company. The reason I quit watching WWE, to be perfectly honest, is because I grew up. I was a big fan in the late 90s during the Attitude Era, when Stone Cold Steve Austin and DX and the NWO were all the big stars. It caught my attention again, I guess about 10 years ago, when CM Punk was on there. And I lost interest again after he left. So since I was so entertained at the WWE bashing on Twitter Sunday night, I decided that I'd give it a shot on Monday night because the NFL game was over at halftime. I mean, it was a blowout. The 49ers absolutely embarrassed Baker Mayfield. We already went over all that. I heard that they had signed a new deal with Fox several months ago that was worth in the billions of dollars. So I figured, what the fuck? Let's give this a shot and see what they've got going on. I figured if Fox is behind them, maybe they've changed a little bit, made the product more adult-oriented. That was some of the worst television I have ever seen in my life. There's not even a hint of reality on that show anymore. It's just pure manufactured garbage. If I were a regular watcher of this show, I'd be embarrassed to tell anyone about it. I mean, it's that bad. They have legit heavyweight boxing champion Tyson Fury on Monday night. And he's, quote, fighting some big dude named Braun Strowman. The punches that they were throwing were so fucking unbelievable. A blind man wouldn't have believed that they were really fighting. I mean, it was that unrealistic. I remember when I was a kid, guys like Ric Flair, Rick Rude, Bret Hart, Shawn Michaels, guys like that, when they were in the ring and they were working with each other, everything looked real, or as real as it could. I mean, you knew they weren't really killing each other in there, but the presentation of it looked legitimate. That's no longer the case with these guys in WWE today. For starters, most of them are smaller than I am. And I'm only about 6 foot, 6'1". But like I said a minute ago, it's nothing but glorified gymnastics inside of a wrestling ring. There's no attempt at making what they're doing seem like a legit fight. I'll be perfectly honest. It was really tough to watch. I don't see how people sit through 3 hours of that bullshit every week. The storylines were complicated to follow. Most didn't make sense. And the ones that did make sense were just completely ridiculous. They had these two broads standing at the top of the entrance, screaming at two other broads in the ring, speaking in some language I can only assume was Japanese or Chinese. The crowd was deathly silent. Matter of fact, the crowd was deathly silent the entire time I was watching. I remember back in the late 90s, the crowds were electric. I went to several WWF shows back then when they came to my hometown. And the crowds were insane. There were signs everywhere in the arena. People were screaming or chanting the entire show. That no longer appears to be the case. Like I said, I listen to a couple of wrestling podcasts just to keep my finger on the pulse of what's going on. Same as I do with Major League Baseball or the NHL or pop culture in general. I don't watch baseball, but I keep up with what's happening for this podcast in case I need to cover something important. Nothing really ever important happens in baseball, but just in case. But WWE has fallen so far in terms of mainstream popularity. I took a look at the ratings just out of curiosity, and they're nowhere near as close to what they used to be. This company's barely averaging over 2 million viewers on Monday nights, on a show that used to routinely draw 4 to 6 million. I completely understand why they have lost viewers, because they put out the worst television on a weekly basis, if that's what they put out every Monday night. I can't believe they're still drawing 2 million. And really can't believe that Fox, a major network with a solid reputation in the sports world, is paying this company billions of dollars for this dribble. I don't see that deal working out in the long run. The crazy thing is, I checked the rating. They premiered on Fox on Friday night, and they drew about 4 million people. Pretty good number. That outdrew the Major League Baseball playoffs. So what the fuck does that say about the status of Major League Baseball in this country when WWE is watched by more people than their playoffs? It's crazy. All right, let's get to the college football plays for the week. Should be a pretty good weekend of college football. 4 games are between teams ranked in the top 25, though I really don't understand how Texas A&M is still ranked in the top 25 with the year they're having right now. But let's go ahead and get to it. First game, Oklahoma at Texas. Current line, Oklahoma -10. Neutral site game at the Cotton Bowl. 2 veteran quarterbacks going head-to-head in what should be the biggest game of the weekend in college football. Also, one of the top rivalries. Jalen Hurts has been on fire this year. This doesn't look like the same guy that we saw under Nick Saban when he was at Alabama. He has absolutely flourished in this Oklahoma system. Totaled over 2,000 yards, 21 touchdowns. Texas quarterback Sam Ehlinger doesn't get the same media attention as Hurts, but he's having a stellar season as well. The Longhorns gave LSU, a team that I like to make it to the national championship this year, they gave LSU all they could handle a few weeks ago. If you watch the Big 12 Conference, then you know that the majority of the teams don't play defense. I believe that's going to be the key to this game. Which of these defenses can get stops when it matters? Texas is awful defensively, highly susceptible to the pass. This Longhorns defense gave up 30 or more points in 3 of their 5 games. I'm not going to sit here and say that Oklahoma has a great defense, because that's not the case. But they can get the job done. They've only given up 30-plus points once. The other 4 opponents were held to 20 points or less. One thing that concerns me with Oklahoma is the penalties. They rank dead last in college football with penalties, surrender about 91 yards a game. With a double-digit line, this could be a big problem. This rivalry game is usually close, but I actually like the Sooners here. I feel like Jalen Hurts will have a field day with this weak-ass Texas secondary. And the Oklahoma defense has proven they can get stops when it matters. Swallowing the points here, taking Oklahoma -10. Next up, Florida at LSU. Current line is LSU -13. Favorite play of the weekend here in college football. I love this LSU team. I said it a second ago. This is the team I like to win the SEC and make it to the national championship. Florida's coming off a big upset win last week at home against Auburn. They benefited from some poor quarterback play by Bo Nix. That's not going to be the case Saturday night in Baton Rouge. Joe Burrow, in my opinion, is the best quarterback in the country. I know Florida's defense is good, and it will be the toughest defense he plays so far this year. But the thing is, I don't think Florida can do enough offensively to keep up with LSU. The Tigers' defense will shut down this weak-ass Florida offense. And I think Burrow does enough to put 30 points on the board. It is tough for these 19, 20, 21-year-old college kids to play two big emotional conference games back-to-back. Florida coming off that upset last week against Auburn, then turning around, going on the road to play LSU at night, after all those crazy Cajuns have had all day to drink. It's going to be a rowdy atmosphere in Baton Rouge. LSU's defense completely shut down Texas A&M's high-powered offense last week. Things should be much easier on them this week with a backup quarterback at Florida. I think this will be a blowout once it's all said and done. Swallowing the points here, taking LSU minus 13. Last game, Penn State at Iowa. Current line, Iowa plus 3.5. One of my favorite spots to look for in college football every year is the Iowa Hawkeyes in a conference game getting points at home. We have that on Saturday night. Every year, it seems like Iowa pulls a big upset at home. We saw it against Ohio State a year or two ago. I think we see it again this weekend. This will be the first real test of the season for Penn State. The one somewhat decent team that they've played all year, Pitt, gave them all they could handle. Struggled for a 7-point win. Low-scoring game. I didn't like the loss last week against an overrated Michigan team, but the Hawkeyes are tough to beat at home. In an underdog situation, it's even tougher. I mentioned the upset win against Ohio State, but this team has a history of upsetting ranked opponents at home. Did it to number 2 Michigan in 2016. Did it to number 17 Nebraska the same year. Head coach Kirk Ferentz gets his team up for games like this. Iowa's won 4 straight at home. 27-6 at home the last 33 games in October. Both of these teams play well defensively, so I think it's going to be a low-scoring game. The points are going to be at a premium. This Penn State team struggled to score at home against a Pittsburgh defense. I don't like their chances to put up many points during a night game in Iowa City against a defense that surrenders only about 9 points a game. So give me the points here. I actually like Iowa to win, taking Iowa plus 3.5. So to recap, we're going to take Oklahoma minus 10, LSU minus 13, and Iowa plus 3.5. Usually lean toward the favorites in college football. Love my dogs in the NFL. You know, when picking these games, I try to pick college games that I like, but are also going to be interesting to you guys. I try to stay away from the big spreads or the games that really don't matter. In the NFL, I don't care. I'm picking the 5 or 6 best spreads of the weekend in the NFL. The Bungles could play the Jets. If I like the line, I'm taking it. All right, that's all for today. I'll be back tomorrow morning with my NFL plays for Sunday. Hit the like and subscribe button on whichever platform you're using. It really does go a long way to help support the podcast, and your support is appreciated. It's tough to get noticed. There's something like 300 hours of video uploaded on YouTube. There's a million podcasts out there. So it's tough to get noticed. So anything you can do to spread the word helps. Follow me on Twitter at KC_BTL84. Leave a comment in the section below. Let me know your college football picks for Saturday. Working on some things for the podcast. I'm going to have a guest on to discuss the upcoming NBA season next week or two. Trying to work that out. Also in the middle of working on getting video set up for YouTube. So if you're listening on Spotify or iTunes or another audio platform, the podcast will still be available in audio format too. I want to get it uploaded in video format on YouTube. I'll see you guys Saturday morning. Have a good Friday.